There's something wonderfully comforting about the names that once shaped Britain. Names that filled ration book queues, church halls, factory floors, corner shops, seaside boarding houses, and the corridors of post-war semis. Names we heard on the wireless, saw on telegrams on mantelpieces, or scribbled on the backs of black and white family photographs, and yet, somewhere along the way, they drifted quietly out of fashion. They retired, slipped into memory, and now live mostly in family stories or in the warm echo of someone saying, "My nan was called that." So today, we're opening another chapter of that old family album, the names you almost never hear on the playground anymore. Not because they were strange or unfitting, but because they belonged to another Britain entirely. A Britain of make-do and mend, coal fires, neighbors who always knew your name, and a sort of gentle decency woven into everyday life. Here are 20 forgotten British names you rarely hear today. Part 2. Number 1. Maureen. Maureen is one of those names that feels soft around the edges, like a gentle breeze coming off the Irish Sea. It reached its height in the mid-20th century, carried proudly by women who balanced work, family, and an astonishing amount of patience. A Maureen always seemed to know exactly what to do, whether that was organizing a raffle, managing a household budget to the penny, or making a perfect pot of tea while chatting through whatever crisis had just unfolded. The name itself has a musical quality, warm and lilting, and yet by the 1980s it had quietly faded from nurseries. It became tied to an older generation, the aunt who sent thoughtful birthday cards, the neighbor who always had spare biscuits in the tin. Today, you hear it and immediately imagine floral aprons, polite conversation. Maureen deserves a gentle revival, even if just in stories. Number 2. Trevor. Trevor is one of the great unsung heroes of British names. Solid, straight-talking, unflashy, and absolutely dependable. It has Welsh roots, but by the 1950s it had spread across Britain like a sturdy pair of work boots. A Trevor could be a bus driver, a PE teacher, the local mechanic, or the man who fixed the boiler for half the price and told you not to fuss. Trevors were practical and no nonsense, and they usually had a firm handshake that meant business. But modern fashion moved towards softer, sleeker names, and Trevor quietly stepped aside. Now, when you hear it, you think of men who built things, repaired things, or simply got things done. The kind of people who held communities together without ever mentioning they were doing it. Number 3. Sheila. There's something immediately cheerful about Sheila, as if the name itself smiles. It was enormously popular from the 1930s through to the 60s, especially among lively, sociable women with a sharp sense of humor and a night-out lipstick that never quite faded. A Sheila knew how to organize a dance, run an office, or keep a household afloat with nothing more than determination and a sensible pair of shoes. The name carries a faint glamour from the post-war years when women embraced new freedoms and brighter fashions. But fashions shifted once again, and Sheila became something you heard mostly in sitcoms or affectionate anecdotes. Yet its friendliness remains unmistakable, like someone greeting you with, "All right, love?" before offering a seat and a biscuit. Number 4. Cyril. Of all the old British names, Cyril may be the most quietly charming. Serious and slightly scholarly, it conjures images of neat handwriting, polished shoes, and men who always arrived 5 minutes early. Cyrils worked in offices, post rooms, libraries, and council departments. They kept things ticking. There was something reassuring about the name, a sense of order, reliability, and mild surprise whenever something broke with routine. By the 1970s, it seemed hopelessly old-fashioned, but say it now and it sounds almost whimsical, like a character from a black and white film who straightens his tie before offering wise advice. Number 5. Brenda. Few names evoke the British mid-century like Brenda. It was everywhere, on school registers, wage slips, wedding invitations, and the signatures on postcards from Butlins. Brendas were warm, capable, and brilliantly organized. There's a certain brightness to the name, as though it carries its own sunlight, yet it slowly drifted from popularity, becoming associated with a generation of office clerks, shop assistants, and women who could type incredibly fast without ever looking down. Today, Brenda feels nostalgic in the best possible way, a name that smells faintly of Nivea cream, fresh laundry, and the comforting rustle of a handbag full of receipts and mints. Number 6. Neville. Neville is distinctly British, gently old school, slightly bookish, and wonderfully polite. It once belonged to boys who loved trains, men who read the newspaper from cover to cover, and uncles who told stories with dramatic pauses. There's a dignity to Neville, something earnest and thoughtful, but it never quite survived the shift toward punchier modern names. Still, say it aloud, and you immediately picture brown cardigans, neatly combed hair, and someone who always knew how to fix a difficult crossword clue. Number 7. Edith. Edith is pure Edwardian elegance, a name steeped in lace, handwritten letters, and a quiet kind of strength. Meaning prosperous in war, it was once incredibly common across Britain, worn by women who lived through times of enormous change. By the post-war years, Edith sounded too old-fashioned, too formal for the age of denim and pop music. Hear the name now and it feels almost poetic, like stepping into an old photograph where the edges have begun to curl. Number 8. Reginald. Reginald, often shortened to Reggie, was once the height of British respectability. It belonged to bank clerks, railwaymen, amateur bowlers, and husbands who polished the car every Sunday. The full version is grand, but the nickname Reggie brings instant warmth. You can imagine him with a cheeky grin, telling a harmless joke, or slipping a pound coin to a grandchild with a conspiratorial wink. Reginald slipped out of favor as minimalism swept through baby names, but its mixture of formality and friendliness is unmistakably British. Number 9. Marjorie. Marjorie is one of the most graceful names Britain ever produced. Soft, melodic, and quietly confident, it once filled convent schools, typing pools, and the backs of family recipe books. A Marjorie always felt dependable, someone who remembered birthdays, kept photo albums meticulously organized, and had a fondness for sponge cakes filled with homemade jam. By the 1980s, it had all but vanished from birth announcements, but hearing it now evokes knitted cardigans, polished furniture, and an age when handwriting mattered. Number 10. Gordon. A classic, solid, straightforward, properly British. Gordon peaked between the 1930s and 60s and could belong to almost anyone. Factory workers, policemen, football fans, men who read the Radio Times cover to cover. There's something sturdy about the name, as though it stands with its feet firmly planted. It faded quickly as modern baby names grew softer and more international, but its no-nonsense charm remains. A Gordon was someone you could depend on to help jumpstart the car or offer advice that was surprisingly wise. Number 11. Norma. Elegant and slightly glamorous, Norma had its heyday in the mid-20th century, often chosen by parents who wanted something refined yet approachable. Normas worked in offices, theaters, and sometimes behind the counter at the local bakery. They had tidy hair, excellent posture, and a sense of pride in whatever they did. The name drifted away as Britain moved into the age of bold fashions and ever-changing trends, but Norma still feels like someone who kept a perfectly organized dressing table with a bottle of perfume always at the ready. Number 12. Basil. Before it became a minor sitcom joke, Basil was a perfectly respectable British name with ancient roots. It once belonged to studious boys, thoughtful men, amateur gardeners, and those who kept notebooks full of observations no one else ever thought to make. Basil has a quiet intelligence to it, gentle, slightly quirky, and undeniably British. Although it lost popularity decades ago, it retains a charm all its own, as if it's always slightly amused by the world. Number 13. Muriel. Soft, lyrical, and steeped in early 20th century gentleness, Muriel has one of the most delicate sounds of all the old names. It belonged to women who wrote letters in flowing script, wore brooches, and kept a tin of biscuits just in case. Muriel carries a sense of kindness, patience, and quiet observation. By the 1970s, the name had slipped entirely out of fashion, but hearing it now feels like opening a drawer of carefully folded table linens, a reminder of a slower, tidier Britain. Number 14. Stanley. Stanley is wonderfully robust, a name that sits somewhere between a craftsman and a storyteller. It once belonged to men who worked with their hands, fixed things nobody else could fix, and always knew how to make children laugh with funny voices or tall tales. Although Stan survived longer than Stanley, the full version evokes a particular kind of British masculinity, practical, reliable, and good-humored. Number 15. Winnie. Few names feel as warm and affectionate as Winnie. It has a softness, a cheerfulness, a sense of someone who always had time for a chat or a quick cup of tea. Winnie belonged to women who survived difficult times and still found joy in small things. Fresh sheets on the line, a radio sing-along, a well-worn armchair by the window. The name faded as fashions changed, but its sweetness remains timeless. Number 16. Albert. Albert is a name with history behind it, proper, dignified, and quietly strong. It was popular throughout the first half of the 20th century, often given to boys expected to grow into steady, respectable men. An Albert might have worked on the railways, in the mines, or at the docks, but wherever he worked, he carried himself with a sense of pride. Though the nickname Albie has made a comeback, the full version is still a relic of another Britain, a Britain of hard work and humble decency. Number 17. Vera. Vera has a rare beauty, simple, elegant, and steeped in wartime courage. It was worn by women who served in factories, hospitals, and civil defense, and who kept families going through years of uncertainty. The name means truth, and there's something honest and sincere about it. It faded as modern names took over, but hear it now and you picture resilience wrapped in kindness. Number 18. Harold. Steady, traditional, and unmistakably British, Harold was a mainstay of early century baby names. Harolds were men of principle, men who read the paper, enjoyed a quiet walk, or tended the garden with practical efficiency. They were unshowy, dependable, and often better at listening than talking. Like many old names, Harold disappeared quickly in the late 20th century, but it lives on in memory as a portrait of gentle strength. Number 19. Agnes. Of all the old-fashioned names, Agnes may be the most beautifully old world. Soft but firm, simple yet full of character, it once belonged to women who baked, taught, mended, and encouraged without ever raising their voices. There's a vintage grace to Agnes, like lace collars and Sunday-best clothes. Some families still quietly adore it, but it remains largely forgotten, waiting, perhaps, for the moment when Britain rediscovers its charm. Number 20. Clive. Clive is unmistakably mid-century, a name with a hint of formality and a dash of adventure. It once belonged to office clerks, amateur photographers, men who fixed radios in their spare time, or kept careful collections of train timetables. Clive is tidy, polite, and slightly reserved, yet full of quiet curiosity. It slipped out of fashion the moment breezier names arrived, but it remains one of those names that feels instantly familiar, like someone who never made a fuss yet, always showed up when needed. These names weren't just labels on birth certificates, they were stories of families, friendships, workplaces, communities, and a Britain that moved at a slower pace. They carry the echo of neighbors calling across gardens, of letters written in looping handwriting, of Sunday visits, gas fires, and people who believed in turning up on time. And although you rarely hear them now, they shaped the generations who shaped us. So perhaps, somewhere out there, a new baby Albert or a little Winnie will appear, reminding us that Even the most old-fashioned names can bloom again when the time is right. Did your family have a Maureen, a Harold, or maybe a Clive? I'd love to hear which names still live on in your stories.